We're live now, Chair.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a joint meeting of the Economy, Residents and Community Scrutiny Committee and the Governance and Audit Committee, one of the regulatory committees of Powys County Council. My name is Lynn Hamilton. I'm a lay member of the Council and the independent chair of Governance and Audit Committee. For purposes of today, Councillor Angela, chair of ERC, and I have agreed that I'll chair today's session and that Councillor Angela will be vice chair for this meeting. And in line with convention, if Councillor Angela wishes to speak, she'll raise her hand and I'll go straight to Councillor Angela. I'll move on now, colleagues, to apologies, and if Carrie-Anne could give us any member apologies and officer apologies that we have received for today's meeting.
Yes, Chair. Apologies have been received from committee members, County Councillors Karina Kenyon-Wade, Sian Cox and Liz Reenenberg, from Cabinet Member County Councillors Sandra Davis, Rafe Devlin and James Gibson-Watt, and from officers Diane Reynolds, Debbie Jones and James Chappell.
Thanks very much, Carrie-Anne. Agenda item 2, are there any declarations of interest relating to the items considered in this meeting today? Not seeing or hearing any, therefore we'll move on to agenda item 3. Agenda item 3 is declaration of party whips. The meeting should receive any disclosure of prohibited party whips which a member has been given in relation to the meeting in accordance with section 78(3) of the Local Government Measure 2011. Are there any, please? There are none. We'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the matter of substance for today's meeting. Before we do so, I just want to make some introductory remarks of my own before we move into the meeting proper. We're meeting jointly today, 15th of July, in response to challenges which have emerged, and in some places those challenges persist following the implementation of the waste recycling route optimisation. Before moving to discuss matters in substance, I think it's important that we put on the record that both committees appreciate and recognise the strength of feeling and indeed emotion around this difficult issue, and that we appreciate as committee members that many communities and residents across Powys have been frustrated by the situation, by the performance failings over the last few months. It's also been a tough time for staff in waste and recycling, and we should recognise the efforts that staff have made, and that it's been a tough time for communities, residents and staff. The context and background to this situation are largely understood, though part of our purpose today is to inquire more deeply and to understand what's gone on. So really this is a message for ourselves as members. Today we're a large joint committee with limited time, and we need to endeavour to get to the bottom of what happened, what went wrong, and to understand why. And importantly, we need to begin to move forward and to derive lessons learnt and to understand how we as a council are going to move forward, learning from this experience. So with that in mind, I'm asking all members of the committee, please to avoid contextualising their questions with a lot of detail and background, and to really focus down on your questions so that we can maximise the time we have to listen to the responses given to us by the portfolio holder and by the senior officers involved. That way we'll maximise the added information that we can derive together today in line with the respective responsibilities of ERC Committee and Governance and Audit Committee. That said, I will now move formally to agenda item 4, and as I do so, I will ask Councillor Richard Church, the portfolio holder, if he wishes to make any opening remarks. Councillor Church.
Thank you, Lynn. Yes, I would like to make some opening remarks. I hope not for too long, because I appreciate you'll have a lot of questions, and I don't want to repeat just what is in the report. I took on this portfolio at the Council's annual general meeting some 2 months ago now, and after the implementation of the route optimization programme. And I'm well aware that after the implementation, there was a period of poor service reliability, causing inconvenience to our residents and damage to the reputation of the council that I'm sure we all regret. By the time I'd taken on the portfolio, the reliability of the service was already beginning to improve, and it's continued to improve since, such that, as you can see from the papers in front of you, by the end of June, 0.24% of collections were reporting as missed, and the figures so far for July, which you don't have in front of you, show that we are now below 2%, performing as well or better in terms of routes left incomplete for the first part of July last year. People will expect that we provide the best possible value for taxpayers' money in the service we provide. It has been identified back in 2021-22 that £105,000 could be saved by a rationalisation of the routes without affecting the service provided. Reviewing the routes to match new house building, changes in demand and uneven workloads of the existing routes is clearly periodically necessary, regardless of potential cost savings. A review of the routes is a highly complex process, and I think the papers in front of you demonstrate that, particularly in rural areas where a range of vehicles is required for minor and major roads. That complexity is something which I think councillors such as myself and others mean that we cannot contribute to designing the routes without the kind of expertise that is required. Observations included in the report around engagement of crews with the design of the new routes are noted, and clearly that engagement could have been better. As the routes have been implemented, further modifications have been made reflecting the experience of crews as they go about their work. It's clear to me that a key reason for initial problems after the implementation was a shortage of vehicles. Delays in the delivery of new vehicles reduced the reliance of the service as it adapted to the new routes, while the date of implementation was set by the delivery of publicity material to every household back in January and February. The report makes clear that the initial problems after the implementation were patchy. While an estimate of 5% of households experiencing a disruption to their service in April or May not seem much, on some routes, particularly those in the north of the county, that figure will be much higher, and it will not reflect people's own experience for themselves or their neighbours. And that's why I am keen that we don't downplay in any way at all the inconvenience and nuisance that this caused to some of our residents. The report sets out the actions that have been put in place to bring the service back on track. Additional vehicles have been secured at short notice, management capacity has been strengthened, and additional incentives offered for bank holiday working. Members of the council have been briefed by email on a regular basis on the issues that have been faced. For the first few weeks of me taking on this portfolio, I received a very large number of inquiries from both councillors and the public about problems in particular localities, which helped me both to build up a picture of the issues for myself and to assist the service in responding promptly to issues as they arise. Going forward, there are some issues highlighted by route optimization which were with us before. One of those is the problems around bank holiday collections, and it's a problem not unique to Powys. Changing the routes has changed those people who expect collections on Mondays, the day of the week, which of course is most common for bank holidays. The usual day of bank holiday collections, with 3 bank holidays in the first 2 months of the implementation period, that issue has been highlighted and it is not simply resolved. The service has been operating with a target of less than 1% of collections being reported as missed. You will see from the figures across the county, we never got close to missing that target. But that doesn't mean that we should be satisfied. The Cabinet has now agreed that that target was wrong and has adjusted it to 0.2% of targets being missed across Powys throughout the year. So far in July, as I've said, we're achieving that target despite the warm weather, meaning an earlier start time for our crews. Further issues around assisted collections and isolated properties or groups of properties being missed due to unfamiliarity of the routes. Looking forward, I hope that we can better use digital in-cab technology to assist crews with information on residents who need assistance with their bins and information on remote pickup points. The experience of the route optimization rollout has not been a good one for the quality of the service during the first 2 months. I believe that the service has responded to that, and there are lessons to be learned in terms of the preparation for major change, staff engagement and communication to ensure that this service, or indeed any other service that's going through a similar process, is more responsive to changes going forward, particularly as we seek to further increases in our recycling rates in the years ahead. I'm happy to take questions, and I will obviously be asking for the help of officers on some of what I'm sure will be more technical questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Richard. Very much appreciated. I will open the floor to questions from joint committee members, and I've got Councillor Pete Lewington, who's a member of both committees, to speak first.
Thank you very much, Joe. Yeah, and thank you, Councillor Richard, for that introduction. A couple of points, if I may. Just picking up on your point around the report, estimating that 5% of households, which is over some 3,500 people, have been impacted by this rollout. I think there is no reliable data to get us to these figures for the real figure, but there's lots of anecdotal evidence around that could actually be higher, such as councillor reports, social media reports, residents telling councillors they've given up reporting. So I find it slightly disingenuous when the report attempts to hide behind reported miscollections and uses these statistics to try to tell us that things aren't that bad. Not once in the report is there any mention of an apology for this, not to residents, not to staff, and I would suggest at least an apology should be forthcoming. So I then sort of look at what went wrong. And for me, this looks like it was a desk-based exercise focusing on route optimization to save money. and ignored all the risk factors which should have been assessed before going live. In effect, these risks are now being borne out and set out in the reports before us today, and they are being presented as effectively excuses for why things went wrong. For me, they should have been identified and addressed up front before the scheme was rolled out. So, one improvement immediately for me that could be made for all future council-wide projects really is to undertake a risk profiling exercise at the concept stage. This would aim to identify all these risks up front and also produce a plan and deadlines to address them. It really shouldn't be good enough to say there will always be risk and issues without having a plan, a proactive plan to deal with them. Only when these risks are addressed or mitigated should the project be implemented. That would be the correct proactive way rather than the retrospective way that we are seeing before us today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pete. I'm going to bring in Councillor Angela a bit before I go to colleagues for responses. Councillor Angela.
It's all right, Chair. I was going to go on with more questioning.
More questioning. Right, okay, thanks very much. We'll look to colleagues to address Councillor Pete's questions, please.
Okay, if I could come in initially and then maybe officers would wish to follow me. First of all, if there isn't an apology in the report, then well, an apology about that. But the council has apologised, I think, very clearly for the failing in the service here. That's been done publicly on a number of occasions. And I think we accept that this didn't go as it should do, and we regret the inconvenience that that's caused to some of our residents. On this question of the 5%, the 5% figure of missed collections is an estimate. It's not the reported missed collections. The reported missed collections at their worst across the whole of Paris were just under 0.5%. We know about, obviously, the missed collections. We know where routes have been missed or partially missed, so we can work out some figures from that. And we also know that, as I said in what I said before, that the picture is very patchy. So while it's 5% across the whole of Paris, in some parts, particularly of North Paris, it could be over 10%, maybe up to 20%, I don't know. And in those areas, the perceptions of the failure of the service will be particularly high. And I know that some people in the south, we've had some councillors down in Brecon who've said to us, well, we don't know what the problem is because there's been no problem down there. It has been very patchy, very localised, and that means that the figures vary widely across the county. In terms of what should have been done in advance, I think what Councillor Pete said there was a statement rather than a question, and it's not one that I disagree with, and it may well come out in your recommendations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Richard. Councillor Angela, and then after that, I've got Councillor William. Councillor Angela.
Thank you very much, Lynn. So my question rolls this right back to the very beginning, and it is mentioned in the paper, but basically, can you be absolutely clear why route optimization was originally considered? Because there's talk of the ongoing need for modernisation, and then there's talk of the £105,000 that needed saving. But there seems to be contradiction in the rule. So can we start at the beginning and be absolutely clear of what this project was, what the problem this project was aiming to solve?
Well, I think, as it states in the report, the saving was identified within the financial year 2021-2 as a future saving that could be made with no damage to the service. I think subsequently to that, and I'll ask officers to come in and add to this, it was recognised that with new house building in various parts of the county, with changes in the demand of the service as we collect more and more recycled goods, that it was time to review it. And clearly, these things have to be reviewed from time to time. And I think it's accepted that when you do have a review, some disruption is likely, and you then have to seek to minimize it. But perhaps John Forsey or Ashley Collins could come in and add to that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Happy to add to that. Yeah, it was put in as a saving, as Councillor Church said in 21-22. Work progressed to put in place the savings. That would effectively be one vehicle and maybe a crew across the county. That's roughly what the savings would have been based on. But as the work progressed, it became clear that there's wider service drivers, as Councillor Richard has said. So it went from being having to make the savings, and the savings context is an interest one. Year on year, I don't want to sort of use this as I'll say it once, but we are actually operating at a net deficit budget than we were 20 years ago. So we're having to make those savings and make the service fit within the operational parameters. As we move forward through the process, EPR money, extended producer responsibility, has become available. That's allowed us to manage that original saving target. But it's the focus now is, rather than trying to make cuts and savings, but put in place investment through the EPR funding to provide an efficient and effective service, which has allowed us to invest in more vehicles to provide a more resilient service across. I know it's difficult to communicate that right now, but as Councillor Church has said, we are seeing those improvements in the service reliability. I'm not sure if my colleague Ashley wants to add any more to that.
Yeah, thank you, John. I mean, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points. One of them is about why we needed to do it and taking out the cost side of things, which John's just covered. But it is an ever-moving feast in waste and recycling. One of the things I hear a lot, that it's one of the most basic services that the council provides. And in terms of what the public get, it is. However, it is far from basic in terms of how it is organised. It's a very complex operation involving collecting a range of different materials, having to process them through sites which are under strict environmental permits. We have to find places for that material to go. I could go on, but in terms of just why we have to do it is because things change. For example, there's much more cardboard packaging now than there used to be. We recycle a lot more than we used to. When this was last done 8 years ago, I think the recycling rate was probably mid-50s%. We're now 70 or thereabouts. So a lot of material has moved from the residual vehicles to the recycling vehicles. There's also the issue of, we've all seen the Rome equipped vehicles that go around, they're multi-compartment. And the way it works, as soon as one compartment's full, that's kind of it, game over. You've got to tip off. And it's building all this in and working out those tonnages. So to just pick up on the desk-based exercise comment, yes, there is quite a lot done on desks. You have to work out the tonnages, you have to work out the routes, you have to work out the times taken to load them, and all that was done on the ground as well, in terms of how long it takes to load a Rome equipment. It's a different time for different staff as well. An older member of staff will take longer than a younger one. So there's so many things that come into the equation, and it's very, very difficult to road test it, because unless you've got everyone putting out that material on that particular day, you have got some of the testing will end up being on the ground. And as we were trying to maximize the efficiencies of our vehicles and staff, it is quite a very fine balance to get right. And on a lot of rounds, we did get it right, but quite a few we didn't. And that is something that we do recognise. And quickly on the reliability of the data, that is the same data that just about every other council uses, and that is kind of what we have. So in terms of the missed collections, it is the same as how we collected it before and after. So it is comparable, but that 5%, as Councillor Richard says, is an estimate. that is a lot of properties, as we've said. So we're not, we're not underplaying that at all. So it's not like that we're saying, oh, it's only 5%. When we're doing 100,000 collections every week, which we do, 5% is quite a lot, and it was focused in certain areas. So we fully appreciate the inconvenience that we have caused, and I'd put on record now, as the senior manager for the service, my apologies to councillors and residents affected. We've tried to get it back on track as quickly as possible, and I think we are doing, but we do appreciate where mistakes have been made. Thank you.
If I could come back, Chair. So thank you for those responses, but I'm not sure that it actually answered my question. You've given us a lot of information there. So my question is seeking clarity on why we started to do this in the first place. And you've given me there, it was about finance, but it was also about increased houses and sharing out the workload. So I'm just curious, when we read through the report, it sounds as if there were already some issues, ongoing issues in the north of the county compared to the south. So was resolving those issues part of this? What I'm trying to work out is I'm trying to get a very clear line of why we set out to do this, because if we don't know that, how will we ever know that this has achieved what it set out to do? So I know I'm being very basic and I'm homing down on this one thing, but you're giving me lots of confusing information. So I'll step back now to allow others to ask questions, and hopefully the bit that I'm trying to get to will come through, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Angela. And I would simply at this stage fully endorse Councillor Angela's question. At the heart of the matter, when we're trying to examine something like this, is what precisely were we trying to achieve and why? Because only by understanding that in the simplest of terms can we then measure its success or otherwise and move on to do things better in the future. So Angela, I think let's hold that and see what emerges over the next series of questioning, but we will be coming back to that kind of primary question. And then I have Councillor William.
Diolch, Cadeirydd, thank you. And my primary question was really already anticipated by Councillor Angela around the perception of some mission creep or a level of confusion as to what the purpose was. And I'm really, that's been partially answered, but as Angela has said, there's more clarity that we need to achieve in response to further questions. I'm interested also in the issue of the level to which we listened to the operatives on the ground, those that deliver the service. We've already heard quite clearly the fact that there've been radically different impacts according to area, partly to the topography, partly to the, I suppose, to the level of rurality or the level of house building and new development in particular areas. But the desktop element is clearly important to get a strategic overview. But I think most people on this call will appreciate that listening to the people who deliver this service on a duly and daily basis is also really critically important. And I wonder whether perhaps when we reflect on this and we reconsider the key learnings from the report, whether one of them should be that we need to listen to those at the front line who understand this probably better than most of us. And so that would be my one question. My second question is, to what extent has there been an opportunity to learn from other councils, particularly councils with a similar mix of terrain to Powys, although I think Powys is unique in its challenges, maybe through WLGA or other circles, as to whether or not there's an opportunity, would have been an opportunity for us to learn on the one hand, and whether we will now be able to harvest the learnings from this report, which have been difficult, and Councillor Richards absolutely correct to state quite emphatically his regret and apology for this, because it has been very detrimental to the reputation of council and colleagues across the county. More so in the north, but there's certainly pockets in the south of similar difficulty will know this to their cost. But ultimately, the residents' experience is far more important than any grief that we rightly get as elected representatives. So those are my two key questions. But I would like to put on record my thanks to Richard for stepping in at a difficult time and for taking a lead in delivering stabilisation and then improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Thank you very much, Councillor William. Councillor Williams' questions, listening to staff and learning from other councils. Who's going to take that?
Well, perhaps if I can start off by acknowledging that you'll see in the RAP report, which is there as an appendix to my report, that there was staff feedback to RAP that they feel that they were not consulted sufficiently on the routes before they were introduced. I think the management feel that there was some engagement with them, but that it probably wasn't sufficient. And I think part of that has been addressed since by the modifications to some of the routes that have been made based upon staff feedback as they've gone out and done them. But yes, perhaps there could have been more engagement beforehand. In terms of benchmarking with other authorities, Ashley will no doubt comment more on that. You can see again within the RAP report some benchmarking in terms of the size of the routes that other authorities use. Whether or not we've had any comparisons with other authorities that have undergone route optimization projects such as this, I don't know, and maybe Ashley will be aware of that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything to add, Ashley?
Yeah, just on the thing of talking to operatives on the ground, that has been a major learning from this exercise, that there should have been more engagement. It was variable across the council, and this may well have some impact on why down in the Brecon area, for example, it's gone so much better than it has in the north. Now, there has speaking to the staff is a very good way of getting feedback, which is what RAP did on the ground in the early stages, of course, when things were going not too well at all at that point, particularly up in the north. Now, we did, we talk about the desk-based exercise, but there was a lot of discussions with supervisors, foremen, who have all come up through the ranks and been operatives to sense check those routes before they were then given out to the staff. Again, we could have done more engagement, certainly, and that is a big learning from this. But what we've been doing since is we now have daily debriefs, which are very comprehensive for every crew that comes back in, and they can give us all this information. What went well? What didn't go well? Are you aware of any miscollections? Were there any problems with this? And that is all then fed back in. So we are very much taking on board what they're saying now. In terms of the opportunity to learn from other councils, the method that we use to do the whole process is a nationally recognised way of doing it with the software we did and using the kind of the tonnages, and that is acknowledged in the RAP report. They have done some benchmarking there, and I think that's very important going forward, and that where we're tweaking rounds now, that we're taking that into account. But it is extremely difficult to do because there's not a single authority anywhere near like the size of Powys, and with the problems that we have in terms of the three depots that we've got across the county. So we are very unique. That doesn't mean we shouldn't look to other authorities, and we are doing, and we're working very, very closely with RAP, and it is an ongoing process with RAP to help us out. RAP go into many, many local authorities and do help them out, as we've acknowledged in the report as well. In hindsight, we should have got them in earlier to help us because they have done a lot of work with other authorities. We were confident, clearly overconfident in the process that we went through, and we have now got them in to help us to get it back on track, which they have been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley. I've got Councillor Chloe next, but I can see Matt Perry's hand is up, and I wanted to know, Matt, do you want to come in response to questions asked so far before I bring Councillor Chloe in?
Yes, please, Chair, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so just to go back to Councillor Angela's point around what was the original intention. Now, route optimization has been something that's been ongoing for a number of years, and the finance part was the original catalyst. But I think, as Ashley and John mentioned, there's been so many different changes going on within the operational aspect. We had Newtown and Welshpool crews merging at Abermule. That then flushed out a number of points within the rounds. It did show that some rounds had some slack, some rounds were more heavy in terms of recycle it. So obviously those routes had to be optimized. And that's why it was looked across the authority in terms of ensuring that those rounds are equal and balanced across. In terms of learning from other authorities, I'd just like to say that I've worked in other authorities that have gone through similar changes to this. And whilst, and I want to put it on record as well, I want to apologise to the residents and to you as members for the inconvenience this has caused. Without doubt, there's definitely lessons learned and how we could have improved it. But I have to say, even with the best plans in the world, working in other authorities, there is disruption. Within Powys, we've been lucky to turn it round in the last 3 months. I'm aware, when I've worked in other authorities, it's gone on 6 months, 12 months. I'm aware of another authority now it's gone on a lot longer. So whilst we had disruption, and I appreciate it was, disruptive to residents and yourselves, we have turned it back round, and the performance now is to where we were back last year. So it'll come through in terms of the questions. One of the biggest issues being the bank holidays impacting it. But I just want to give you assurance as a committee that this is not unique to Powys. This has happened. This does happen across other authorities, and the average is about 3 to 6 months of disruption before things settle down. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Angela.
If I may, Lynn, I just wanted to thank you, Matt, for explaining that. I just want to come back to Ashley to say that I think it's really positive that you do recognise that Powys is that unique compared to other counties in terms of its still put a higher average pass rate on each of our rounds than any other county. So I don't understand the rationale behind that. If we're already accepting that we are the most challenging of council, yet we're expecting our workforce to deliver more faster than any other county, that doesn't quite make sense to me. So how do you tie the two?
I'm happy to come back. I don't know if anyone else was not hearing.
Yes, Councillor Angela, your mic dropped off at the start of your question.
Basically, Ashley, I was pleased that you recognise the additional challenges that the geography and topography of Powys provide over and above other counties, the rurality, etc. So I don't understand why, when we look on page 27, table 6 of the RAT report, where it clearly shows there that compared to other rural counties, we were expecting our teams to do a higher workload.
Okay, Thank you, Chair. On that, I mean, obviously I'm aware of the figures that you're referring to, and they do vary.